Welcome to the statement. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to update the House on my visit to the Gulf, the evolving situation in the Middle East and the implications for Britain's security. But before I do that, I want to put on record in this House my total determination to make the changes across the entire state that are so clearly necessary to honour the victims, the injured and the families of Southport. Today's report, Mr. Speaker, is harrowing. It is difficult to read, and I cannot begin to imagine the pain upon pain that it will cause the families that it affects. And our thoughts are with them today. And the Home Secretary will respond to the report in full, Mr. Speaker, after this statement. Mr. Speaker, last week I visited the Gulf and I was able to thank in person some of the brave men and women who, from day one of the US-Iran conflict, have resolutely defended the interests of this country, its people and its partners. I thank them again, Mr. Speaker, in this House for their courage and their service, and I'm sure the whole House will join me in those thanks. Mr. Speaker, whilst in the Gulf, I met leaders and senior military representatives across the region, including the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the President of the UAE, the King and Crown Prince of Bahrain, the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar, and in recent days I've also spoken to the Sultan of Oman and the Emir of Kuwait. Across all of these conversations, I agreed to deepen our engagement on both defence and economic resilience. Because, Mr. Speaker, they all made it abundantly clear that the solidarity and strength of our partnership with them has been a comfort in these challenging times. And we should not forget that the nature of Iran's response, the indiscriminate attack upon countries who never sought this conflict, the huge damage done across the Gulf to civilian infrastructure, with civilian casualties, is abhorrent. It has clearly shocked the region and all of us, and we must bear that in mind now as we lift our sights to the future. Because whilst the ceasefire between the US, Israel and Iran is undeniably welcome, it is also highly fragile. The region remains on edge, and a lot of work is required to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, to de-escalate the situation, leading to a sustainable ceasefire. In pursuit of that goal, we call for Lebanon to be included urgently in the ceasefire. Diplomacy is the right path, and I welcome the talks taking place this week. Hezbollah must disarm, but I'm equally clear Israel's strikes are wrong. They are having devastating humanitarian consequences and pushing Lebanon into a crisis. The bombing should stop now. Mr. Speaker, we also put on record our thanks to Pakistan and other partners for playing such an important role in diplomatic efforts. We hope the process will continue without further escalation. And that applies to the running sore that is the Strait of Hormuz, shamefully exploited by Iran. All of the leaders that I met were crystal clear that freedom of navigation is vital and must be restored, no conditions, no tolls, and no tolerance of Iran holding the world's economy to ransom. Because, Mr. Speaker, the impact of Iran's behaviour in the Strait is causing untold economic damage. It's visible on every petrol forecourt in the country. My guide from the start of this conflict has always been our national interest. That's why we stayed out of the war and why we continue to stay out of the war. And that is why we are working now to restore freedom of navigation in the Middle East, because that is squarely in our national interest. Now, Mr. Speaker, quite clearly, this is not a straightforward task. It will take time. I met UK businesses in energy, shipping, insurance and finance, and they are clear that vessels will not be put through the Strait until they are confident that it's safe to do so. And that's why we're working around the clock on a credible plan to reopen the Strait. And, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm today that together with President Macron, I will convene a summit of leaders this week to drive forward the international effort we have built in recent weeks, bringing together dozens of countries to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. The summit will be focused on two things. First, diplomatic efforts to bring pressure to bear for a negotiated end to the conflict and for the Strait to be opened. Second, military planning to provide assurance to shipping as soon as a stable environment can be established. And let me be very clear, this is about safeguarding shipping and supporting freedom of navigation once the conflict ends. Our shared aim here is a coordinated, independent, multinational plan. This is the moment, Mr. Speaker, for clear and calm leadership. And notwithstanding the difficulties, Britain stands ready to play our part. Mr. Speaker, let me now return to the impact of this conflict on our economy. We all know that the consequences will be significant and that they will last longer than the conflict itself. Now, we continue to monitor the effects, and I remind the House that energy bills went down on the 1st of April, and whatever happens in the Middle East, those bills will stay down until July. We're investing over £50 million to support heating oil customers, and fuel duty is frozen until September, all because of the decisions that this government took at the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a wider point, because we can't stand here in this House and pretend that a global shock threatening to hit the living standards of British people is somehow a novel experience. Britain has been buffeted by crises for decades now, from the 2008 financial crash, through austerity, Brexit, COVID, the war that still rages in Ukraine, and the disastrous premiership of Liz Truss. The response each time has been to try to return to the status quo. A status quo, Mr. Speaker, that manifestly failed working people who saw their living standards flatline and their public services decimated. So this time, Britain's response must and will be different to reflect the changing world that we live in. That starts with our economic security, where during this conflict alone, we've capped energy bills, raised the living wage, strengthened workers' rights, and ended the two-child limit that will lift nearly 500,000 children out of poverty. But, Mr. Speaker, looking forward, it also means a closer economic relationship with our European allies, because Brexit did deep damage to the economy. And the opportunities we now have to strengthen our security and cut the cost of living are simply too big to ignore. It continues, Mr. Speaker, with our energy security, where I say once again, oil and gas will be part of our energy mix for decades to come. But, Mr. Speaker, we do not set the global price for oil and gas. And households across the country are fed up with international events beyond their control pushing up their energy bills, and I stand with them on that. So we will go further and faster on our mission to make Britain energy independent, because that is the only way we get off the fossil fuel rollercoaster and take control of our energy bills. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we must strengthen our defence security. That means boosting our armed forces, as we have, with the biggest sustained investment since the Cold War. It means doubling down on the most successful military alliance the world has ever seen, the NATO alliance, of which this party in government was a founding member. But it also means strengthening the European element of that alliance. taking control of our continent's defence more robustly, deepening our partnerships. Have we done with our deals to build Norwegian frigates on the Clyde, Turkish Typhoons in Lancashire? Not only, Mr. Speaker, creating thousands of secure jobs and opportunities for our defence industry right across the country, but also enhancing the way our armed forces can collaborate with our allies. Because, Mr. Speaker, as the Middle East conflict shows once more, the world in which we live has utterly changed. It is more volatile and insecure than at any period in my lifetime, and we must rise to meet it, calmly but with strength. That is exactly what we're doing at home and abroad. We are strengthening our security, taking control of our future and building a Britain that is fair for all. And I commend the statement to the House.
Kevin Badenoch, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. I would also like to pay tribute to our brave servicemen and women serving in the Middle East right now. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is right that Britain did not start this war, but whether we like it or not, we are impacted by it, and this is likely to get worse. The cost of borrowing has jumped, petrol prices are climbing, inflation is rising, and living standards falling. It is time to take decisive action in our national interest. Britain must focus on what is in our power to protect British citizens today. First, we must rapidly solve the energy crisis this war has caused in our country. And second, we must make sure that Britain is ready to defend herself in this new age. A nuclear-armed Iran is an existential threat to the UK. We should be in no doubt whose side we're on in this war, our allies in the Middle East and the United States. So I welcome the Prime Minister meeting some of those allies, and I also welcome his support for diplomatic efforts and military planning to restore freedom of navigation in the region. But we will need to go further than just talking. He says Britain stands ready to play our part. We can all see that we were not ready for this situation. Here's what we need to do now. First, we must take rapid action to increase our energy security and keep bills down, not just until July, but longer than that, permanently. Britain is particularly vulnerable to energy price shocks because we are killing domestic oil and gas production in the North Sea. Labour's policy of more expensive energy and deindustrialisation at this time of crisis is dangerous and irresponsible. It is also harming the defence industry. We must start drilling our own oil and gas in the North Sea, grant licences for drilling in the Jackdaw and Rosebank fields, and restore British production before it is too late. The Prime Minister says this won't impact international prices. This is more than international prices. This is about the domestic supply, especially of gas, all of which is used in this country. Supply matters. And finally, the government must cancel the proposed rise in fuel duty. Hiking taxes on motorists for the first time in 15 years, while prices are surging, is a disgraceful decision. If Britain is to be a stronger country, it needs a stronger economy, not one being hammered by the highest energy prices in the developed world. So, will the Prime Minister grant the oil and gas licences and scrap the rise in fuel duty? I know he'll say that it's the Energy Secretary's job. The Energy Secretary is not the Prime Minister. He is. He can instruct him to grant those licences. But, Mr. Speaker, secondly, to be ready, Britain must be able to defend herself. And that means we must be ready for these situations before they happen. France and Greece, they are I don't know why they're laughing. I'm surprised they're laughing, because last time I checked, France and Greece sent ships to protect our bases in Cyprus while our destroyer was stuck in Portsmouth. It was a national embarrassment on their shoulders, and it should never happen again. We need no further evidence that we are living in a more dangerous world than a decade ago. I'm sure Labour MPs will try and think of a way to make this my fault. Let me remind them, yes, I know it is preposterous, but let me remind them the historical illiteracy that is on those benches. Governments of all colours, including those guys there, spent the peace dividend from 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, until the Ukraine war. And when that war came, the Conservative government responded rapidly and unequivocally. We didn't have anything stuck in Portsmouth when Ukraine was invaded. We trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and equipped them with our missiles. We increased defence spending every year since the war started, but the world has since become even more dangerous. Every serious person, Mr. Speaker, every serious person, especially in the military, agrees that Britain must now find a way to spend 3% of GDP on defence by the end of this Parliament. After the election, many of the plans for spending were paused for Labour's strategic defence review. 9 months after publishing it, there is still no defence investment plan that explains how we will fund this. The Defence Readiness Bill is also nowhere to be seen. The question is not whether we need to increase defence spending. The question is what tough choices we must make to do so. That is what is missing from the government's plan. The government has a plan for welfare spending until 2031, but no plans for defence spending. So I say to the Prime Minister, let's put party interest aside. Yes. I'm glad that they're laughing, because I want the public to hear Labour MPs laughing when we say let's put party interest aside. So please keep laughing. Go on, please keep laughing. I say to the Prime Minister, let's find the money to rearm. Let's identify the spending cuts. And if we reach agreement on a joint plan, we can all support those measures in Parliament. Conservatives have already found savings to fund more than £20 billion extra for defence spending. I am willing to work with him to go further. And in his response, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Prime Minister will be tempted to misrepresent my position and pretend that I demanded he join in the initial strikes. Yes, I know. They can't even resist the temptation. He and I both know that is not true. But let us get serious. Let's get serious. It is time for us to act decisively in our national interest. Let's show our allies what we bring to the table. Let's show our enemies that we are able and ready to defend ourselves. That requires a defence investment plan. So I ask the Prime Minister in conclusion, when exactly will the defence investment plan be published, and what action is he taking to find the money to pay for it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I noticed that her opening sentence has changed. She used to say, we didn't start the war, but like it or not, we're in it. And we should be in it. That was her position. Now she says, well, they can't make their mind up. They supported the war without thinking through the consequences, and now they're pretending they didn't support the war and they're against it all along. She challenged my position, and she did the mother of all U-turns on the most important decision the Leader of the Opposition ever has to take. Can I thank her for her support for the planning that we're doing with other countries? It is important. It has a number of components, the political and diplomatic component, the logistics as well in terms of getting the vessels through, where we're working with the sector, and of course the military component. We've been working on that for 2 or 3 weeks now, and now bringing together with President Macron the summit later this week in that regard. In relation to energy bills, Mr. Speaker, yes, we all want to get energy bills down, and oil and gas will be part of the mix for many years. But it is because we're on the international market that our bills have gone up, and that is the problem. The Strait of Hormuz is a choke point for energy oil and gas getting to the international market. That's pushed the price up. That's being reflected in every household. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, the only way to take control of our energy bills is to go faster on energy independence. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition used to make that argument. In 2022, she said this: it is investment in nuclear and renewables that will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and keep costs down. She changes her mind on everything. That was her argument. And now just like she pretends she wasn't in favour of getting involved in the war, now she pretends she wasn't in favour of keeping costs down. And, Mr. Speaker, she says that we must be ready. That's coming from a party that hollowed out our armed services. Mr. Speaker, on their watch, frigates and destroyers were reduced by 25%. Mine-hunting ships reduced by 50% on their watch. And she lectures us about being ready, having hollowed out our armed forces and hollowed out our capabilities. We're investing £300 million more in shipbuilding, and we've got 13 ships on order. That, Mr. Speaker, is the difference between the two parties. And, Mr. Speaker, I hope that she and they will forgive me. After 14 years of breaking everything under their watch, I'm going to resist the offer of joint planning from the government, from the party that crashed the economy, hollowed out our armed forces, crashed our public services. Thanks, but no thanks.
Chair of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Affairs Committee has just come from a meeting with some of the Gulf ambassadors, who are genuinely grateful for the help that